Hi, this is Primary Cinema, and today I wanted to have a little review slash discussion about The Phoenician Scheme, Wes Anderson's newest film. I saw it last week and still have a lot of thoughts about it percolating in my mind, so figured why not make a video about it, see maybe what you guys think. The Phoenician Scheme, on its surface, seems to be a sort of scaled back narrative compared to Wes's previous films. It is sort of easy enough to recount as a plot summary, unlike maybe some of his previous stuff. I'm sure I'll still mess it up, but I'll try anyway. Benicio del Toro stars as Zaza Corda, great name, a European titan of industry and mastermind behind large-scale infrastructure projects. His latest of which, the titular Phoenician Scheme, is conspired against by a shadowy cabal who raise the price of some of his raw materials and create a hole in his budget, which he has to remedy by visiting the major investors of his project, the Phoenician Scheme, and finding where that money is going to come out of whose pocket, basically. All the while, he's accompanied by his daughter, played by Mia Tripleton, I think is how you say it, Kate Winslet's daughter, who is very nearly a nun, not quite yet a nun, but very nearly a nun, and sort of disavowing her father's fortune and her family's great wealth and committing her life to religion. Big central tension going on is that for some reason Zaza is convinced that his daughter must be his sort of sole heir and apparent successor. When I say it seems a bit scaled back and a bit easier to explain, it's not sort of like the Grand Budapest Hotel where it's a film, but it's also opens as a book, being introduced by the author, who is actually a character within the book. And it's not like the French Dispatch, which is like a magazine issue. It's not Asteroid City, which is like a play, which is also a movie, which is also like a TV show documentary about the making of the play. It's really not like, it doesn't have all those sort of frills and narrative devices surrounding it. It's a bit more of a straight, shocked kind of a thing. I'm saying all this, of course, but there is a little bit for, you know, as it would be with Wes now at this stage, there is a little bit of that kind of tinkering around and what I would call stratifying of the narrative. In this case, it's not a sort of breaking out of the fourth wall and addressing the audience or addressing the form that the film is in itself, but it's breaking the narrative into two parts, where it's basically first the major one, which is set in what is ostensibly like the real world or the world of the film, and then a second layer, which is set in the afterlife or sort of heaven kind of looking place, more like a Bergman film than heaven, but Bill Murray and Willem Dafoe are there, and Benicio del Toro visits a... Did I mention? I'm not sure. I've I've done a few versions of this intro. I'm not sure if I mentioned Zaza Corda is a frequent target for assassination attempts. I may have messed up the plot, I'm not sure. But nonetheless, Benicio del Toro is frequently, the target of assassination attempts, and he has many near-death experiences throughout the film. And in the result of these near-death experiences, he sort of has these visions of life after death and judgment and meeting God and explaining his actions and this type of thing. But we still have that kind of stratifying of narrative, which I really enjoy. I think these sort of breaks from the story can kind of act as soliloquies. They kind of speak out character intentions. They kind of surface subtext and really kind of enrich some of the later on character interactions. Okay, that's most kind of crucially done in Asteroid City, and sort of Jason Schwartzman's character questioning, what is the purpose of this? How do I continue on? And that sort of role of the actor being a allegory for life and so on. It still kind of has that thing we expect from Wes Anderson films now, which is that not just having an A plot, a B plot, and a C plot, which you expect in usual films, but also has sort of like an A reality and a B reality. I'm not quite sure if there's a C reality here, maybe there is, but I do think some of the actors look at the camera at some stage, so you could maybe say that the audience and us viewers are C reality, maybe. But I'm just talking through my arse. I enjoyed this film probably a bit more than Asteroid City. I felt Asteroid City's realities sort of folded in a bit too much on top of themselves, and it felt a bit more of an intellectual exercise than a full-blown story. I've watched it a few times now, and I still kind of get that sense that it's just a little bit too clever, a little bit too much going on. It sort of felt like, you know, you see sometimes people get a present and it's a really big box, and they rip open the present and they open the box and there's another box inside, and you rip it open again and another box and another box and another box, and it goes on for ages and ages and ages. And then at the end, when it's down to this size box and you really hope, you know, you open it and it's going to be something fulfilling, I wasn't sure about that sort of payoff was there in Asteroid City. That was just my kind of opinion on it. But I found the heaven stuff here, the sort of afterlife Bergman-esque sort of scenes in Phoenician Scheme, were sort of better justified and required less sort of buy-in from the viewer and less exposition from the film to justify his existence. But I'm still very interested in how Anderson is developing as an artist, and especially as a storyteller. Still as a visual artist as well. You know, there's a lot of kind of, people would say, a Wes Anderson movie now at this point, they all look the same, or sort of, you know what to expect. I find there's still a lot of invention and innovation going on in his films if you compare them. Especially in this film, there's of course the Bergman style heaven scenes, but there's also some really nice kind of first person film photography. There's a scene where someone gets strangled and you see it from their point of view. I found that really fun. Going on to talk about, you know, less about the narrative structure, more about like the casting characters. Benicio del Toro, I think, is really a lot of fun here. Zaza Corda, as I, you know, I said it before, I'll say it again. What a name! He's a really fun kind of character here. He's comedic. He does require some dramatic chops, especially when interacting with his daughter in those heaven scenes, where he kind of has to wrestle with his own mortality and kind of what it is he wants out of life. I think is I think that, oh, that's pretty great. Mia Tripleton, as I said, Kate Winslet's daughter, as I said. She has a great look. She really fits in well with the Wes Anderson kind of aesthetic and the world that she's in. And she plays this kind of emo nun in a really fun way. She has a kind of storyline similar to the daughter in the latest season of The White Lotus, in that she's this child of privilege who is sort of disavowing it all in the name of spirituality. And, you know, it doesn't sort of go as simply as that. It's a bit more complicated, and you kind of have to reckon with having that kind of money and what you do with it and that kind of thing. So I really enjoyed it. Michael Cera, though, is the real discovery in the film. I don't know how it's taken this long for Michael Cera and Wes Anderson to work together, but I'm really glad they have finally. Michael Cera is one of my favorite actors of all time. Super bad for life, but I did not mention in the plot summary, he is a Swedish tutor hired by Benicio del Toro to kind of be their edutainment for himself and his daughter as they travel and during their downtime, and also sort of act as a personal assistant. And, you know, he has a lot going on in the film. Michael Cera, he probably has the most, out of the actors, he has the most to do in the film. In that he has like a nice romantic subplot with Mia Tripleton, and as well, there's, I won't, you know, get into spoilers or anything, but I will say fans of 2009's Miguel Arteta film Youth in Revolt will find a lot to like in this film. I certainly am a fan, and I certainly did enjoy it, so bear that in mind. Other than that, you know, you got the mix of kind of usual Wes Anderson staples, as well as like some of the new blood he's bred in the last while. So you have like Bill Murray and Willem Dafoe showing those Heaven Bergman kind of scenes. You have Tom Hanks and Bryan Cranston. Their scenes are maybe kind of a bit of a low point in the film for me personally. They play American investors, and their dispute with Zaza is sort of figured out over a game of basketball. With Zaza, Riz Ahmed, who I think really fits in lovely with the Wes Anderson world as well. But Bryan Cranston and Tom Hanks, you know, I just, for some reason, that kind of basketball thing felt a bit kind of formulaic, or kind of like the screenplay was calling for it rather than the characters were calling for it, you know? So it felt, I kind of crossed my arms during that scene. They're the first investors they meet, and I kind of crossed my arms going, oh, is this going to be what they're all like? But luckily they're not, and a lot of the kind of later meetings with investors are a lot more kind of fun and emotionally resonant, and kind of have just, you know, a better sort of plot device than a game of basketball. Scarlett Johansson, I think, is a kind of a big standout for that. She has like some really fun scenes later on in the film playing Zaza's cousin slash ex-wife. What else? Oh, I would say like Benedict Cumberbatch. The jury's still out on him in Wes Anderson films, in my opinion. I know I saw some people kind of say like, oh, he's made for this kind of era of Wes Anderson. I don't know. He seems to play weird characters to me. He always kind of piles on a lot of makeup, and here he has like a really big beard and weird crazy eyes. I don't know if that's really what Wes Anderson characters look like. I think they kind of look a bit cooler and more kind of like aspirational a lot of the time. So Benedict Cumberbatch, I'm still, jury's out. I was thinking somebody, maybe me. I don't know if I can appoint myself this responsibility, but I think somebody at some point needs to do like a tier list for frequent Wes Anderson actors, because Benedict Cumberbatch I'd put fairly low down here. He still hasn't convinced me. Michael Cera, I think he's maybe in an A block at the minute. And, a few more collabs, get him up to an S tier, up with Tilda Swinton and Willem Dafoe and all those good guys. But, yeah, maybe that's something we need to do at some point. We need to reckon with who is ultimately the ultimate Wes Anderson cast. It would be good in a draft style, wouldn't it? Yeah, that would be fun. Yeah. Someone should do that. Richard Ayoade is also in the film. He plays this sort of communist revolutionary leader of a militia who are sort of entertained by the capitalist class as this kind of necessary sort of nuisance that they have to put up with. And that's sort of a fun dynamic for him. I will say, Richard Ayoade, I need to see him direct more. I know he has like a George Saunders adaptation coming up, so hopefully he will do more directing and, less blurb writing. If you know, you know. I'm praising the film an awful lot, but I don't know. I do think it's kind of destined to be a sort of one of Wes's minor works. I don't think it's going to get the kind of praise and acclamation that Grand Budapest Hotel will get. I don't know if whoever reached that sort of level of acclaim again in the mainstream audience's opinion. I don't know. But and I also don't think it will get that kind of, hey, this is my personal favorite one, in the way that Asteroid City is for a lot of people. I think this is going to be kind of a mid-tier one for a lot of people, but I think there's still a lot of joy to be found in this. A lot of interesting development as him as a storyteller, as I've said. I think, fun cast, fun enough story, is at points feels a little bit hermetic. And I mean that kind of in the sense that the sets just feel a bit small. There's a lot of, set scenes set in, burrowed out tunnels or on a private plane. And it's just this very kind of small, oppressive space. And even when they're outdoors, they're not really outdoors. They're studio outdoors, So there was a point maybe about an hour in the film where I thought, I would really like to kind of stretch my legs and change things up a bit. Wes Anderson, I think, would just benefit from that kind of doing more kind of maybe shooting on location, I think would be fun. Less studio stuff. I'm thinking kind of himself and Tim Burton are very similar filmmakers. Not that, Wes certainly hasn't had that kind of decline that Burton had. But those, kind of first few Burton films that really stand out and have that kind of similar, they have a style, they have a point of view, they have a, something that you can mimic very easily if you wanted to. Very recognizable, who's behind here, the art direction and all that kind of thing. But then at a certain point, Tim Burton kind of retreated into green screen spaces and kind of digital environments. And I think Wes is, he could possibly be at risk here of retreating into still, has to be said, practical and, real and artfully made sets, but still they can be in their own way just oppressive and, a little bit kind of you want to see the real world at some point. You want to feel sunlight, even if it's in a dark cinema screen. You want to kind of see the great outdoors and the horizon and all these kind of things that are kind of a little bit have been pushed out of his films a little bit in the last while. French Dispatch, there has a bit of it, but Asteroid City in here feel very much in the studio, feel very at times kind of comped together, and I'm thinking just how Tim Burton said of Beetlejuice 2 kind of made him fall back in love with filmmaking and kind of do a lot of practical things and effects and sets and stuff. Obviously, Wes is doing that here. He's doing practical sets and he's doing probably like a lot of things in camera, but at the outdoors and kind of the idea of not having as much control and maybe trying to jive his aesthetic and his creative intent with the real world and what he has in front of him, instead of what he can have handmade by a team of expert artists. I like that kind of dichotomy and that tension between what he has and what he's trying to succeed at. That's why Rushmore is probably my favorite film of his, because I just think it's that kind of perfect point in his filmography where he has enough resources to make something really, really, really special and really uniquely his, but he still is doing a lot of things in the real world and found locations. He's not, handpicking everyone's, outfit is tailor-made to them, and it's not every set is, being decked out by a set decorator in some studio somewhere. He has to kind of work within the environment he has, and it really turns out really well. So I'd like to see that a return to that at some point. I don't think Wes is, ever at risk of getting there in a kind of budgetary sense, but I think he can create those tensions himself if he wants to, and he may benefit from it. But yeah, those are my thoughts on the Phoenician Scheme, as scattered and as contradictory as they are. I hope you enjoyed the video. Please do let me know what you think in the comments below. And, please like, comment, subscribe. I have a few other kind of ideas percolating around that I want to do. Maybe that tier list for Anderson cast and coming up with the ultimate Wes Anderson film cast is something I need to do. There's other kind of stuff as well. I'm reading Ulysses at the minute, and oh boy, is there something you can talk about with Ulysses in film, but that's for another day. I'll bid you adieu and farewell. I don't have a sign off. I have, hi, this is Primary Cinema for the beginning. I have nothing for the end. Just goodbye. Especially like they're bad at basketball. Zaza and Riz Ahmed. I don't know why they, whatever.